And this week's cabinet reshuffle by Prime Minister Julia Gillard sees new ministers for the community sector. Brendan O'Connor will become the Human Services Minister, replacing Tanya Plibersek, who moves into Cabinet and takes over the health portfolio. Mental Health and Ageing Minister Mark Butler will keep his position, but will join Cabinet, where he'll also take on social inclusion responsibilities. Peter Shergold, your best place, of course, to comment on this. What do you think the changes mean for the sector?
Well, it's very interesting. When you get changes like this, inevitably the media tend to look, well, who's the winners and losers? Answer, Greg Combet on the one hand or Kim Kaur on the other. Or, you know, victory for the faceless men, rewards for Mark Arbib or Bill Shorten. Or, interesting in this time, what it's meant for women. You know, the first female Attorney-General, more women in Cabinet than ever before. But in fact, it's very significant, I think, in terms of social inclusion and the community sector, particularly with Tanya Plibersek moving on.
Yeah, is that quite a big loss? Because I know we've spoken in the past, she's very engaged and she's been kind of really in the sector and been part of it.
She has, and she's really been the public face of social inclusion for the last year and a half. And before that, in the first term of government, very active in the area of homelessness and affordable housing. So, in a way, she will be a loss. But what's interesting, you're right, Brendan O'Connor has become the Minister for Human Services. But in a sense, the real story is beyond that. So you have Jenny Macklin, who keeps her ministerial position, but now takes on the additional responsibility for disability reform, which is very big. Robert McClelland, of course, who in a sense was demoted from being Attorney-General, but he has stayed in Cabinet and he will have responsibility for housing and for homelessness. That's quite interesting because it brings those two together, which they weren't before. And then, as you say, you've got the promotion of both Mark Butler and Julie Collins. So Mark Butler was a minister, has now gone into Cabinet. He had responsibility for mental health and aged care, which he keeps, but he will now also become the Minister for Social Inclusion. And Julie Collins from Tasmania, she was the Parliamentary Secretary. She now joins the Outer Ministry as the Minister for Community Services. So there are a lot of different ministers have part of the responsibility.
Yeah, which kind of begs the question, even the sheer number of names that you've just mentioned, is social inclusion kind of been scattered everywhere? Is that an effective way to do it?
I've been talking to a lot of the community people this morning, and there are two views. One is that this is very positive because, in a sense, the various areas on social inclusion are more represented around the Cabinet table than ever before. Against that, some people are a bit worried that the energy is going to be dissipated into a series of, siloed areas. We'll just have to wait and see. Certainly, I think the Prime Minister was pretty positive about still keeping a social inclusion agenda.
I mean, just to be clear as well, what government policies does social inclusion actually cover?
Well, here's the problem. It is very wide-ranging. So if you look at government policy, it says that social inclusion is about the jobless, vulnerable children, the homeless, people with a disability or mental illness, Indigenous communities or people living in a disadvantaged location. Now, the trouble is, in a sense, all their forms of social inclusion are rather different. And what we've now got with this Cabinet reshuffle is, in a sense, those different parts of the social inclusion agenda are sitting with different ministers.
Peter, just to move on, we've also seen, actually just before Tanya Plibersek left, she kind of put out a report card on the achievements in social inclusion in the past 4 years. What did that kind of actually cover? What did you think of it?
Well, it goes back to just what we've been saying, because it's called Foundations for a Stronger, Fairer Australia, and it's a report card on the last 4 years in social inclusion. But as you read it, it comes a bit of a shopping list or a grab bag of Christmas presents. So, at one level it talks about, a fairer industrial relations systems or higher pensions or better Centrelink services. It covers so many areas, it's difficult to get a strategic focus. As I read it, I thought the key areas were the areas of what the government has done in terms of homelessness and providing affordable housing, and, of course, the commitment to a national disability insurance scheme. Interestingly, in terms of governments working with community organisations, it's really a quick genuflection at the end, not very much. But as I say, it's both the strength and the weakness of the social inclusion agenda.
Volunteering is always a good topic of conversation as well. We've just launched the National Volunteering Strategy. Tell us a little bit about it. And, I guess Australians have a good record of volunteering, but, sometimes it's not that easy.
I know. On the whole, we have a pretty good record at volunteering. We have about 36% of adult Australians volunteer, and that's a pretty conservative definition. There is no doubt that overall we do better than most countries. If you measure, people who have helped a stranger, for example, in the last month, we do better than virtually any country in the OECD. But clearly there are some challenges that are starting to emerge.
It's interesting as well, another topic completely, just some new research that's come out talking about consumers. We're talking about consumers all the time on the Business Channel at the moment because of the Christmas spending season. But there is research that you've been looking at that shows consumers are switching allegiances to brands or companies with brands that actually do support charity, which is interesting.
It is interesting, and you wonder whether it's a bit of a sell going on here. It's a survey by Cavill Co. There's about 1,200 consumers. But what it's saying is, on their survey, they found about half of those they surveyed said they would be willing to change the brand they buy if they could see that it was doing good charitable purpose, so that there is an advantage in attaching your product to a particular good cause. Interestingly, they reckon a quarter of Australians have actually done that in the last year. And perhaps not surprisingly, women seem to be more willing to go to a brand which they associate with good causes. 28% of women say they have changed brands accordingly, only 19% of men.